He pressed my wrist against the cold wall, and the whole world held its breath. His eyes, those eyes of contained storm, didn't ask. They commanded. "You thought you could run from me?" he whispered, and each letter seared my skin like red-hot iron. The scent of blood still clung to his hands. My blood or theirs, it no longer mattered. The pack howled outside, awaiting the signal. One gesture from him and it would all be over. But instead, he did the unthinkable. He released my arm and stepped away. Before we dive into this story, leave a comment with a rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're joining us from. May this moment bring reflection and emotion to your heart. I always knew the sound of wolves announced the end. Not the end of the body, but the end of the lie I wore to stay alive. That night, the moonlight was too white, too cold, and every leaf seemed a blade suspended above my skin. From atop the hill, I heard the distant chorus of beasts and knew the Alpha King had found me. For 3 moons I had fled him, crossing rivers, burning trails, erasing my tracks. But there is no escaping when your pursuer knows the rhythm of your blood. They came in silence, 300 white wolves encircling the abandoned house where I hid. Their paws were echoes on the snow, and their eyes contained embers. Inside, I cowered between decaying walls, my hands stained with paint and dirt, as if fear had colour. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it would betray me before the king arrived. When he appeared, the world stopped breathing. Mounted on his black horse, his body erect, his gaze fixed, there was a presence in him that time, dared not touch. The moon touched his hair, and it seemed like living silver. He was the same man who had once condemned me to exile. But now, seeing me, something in the air broke. A nearly invisible crack, an ancient tremor between us. "She is here, my king," one of the captains said. But the Alpha did not reply. He dismounted slowly, and the sound of the reins was the only noise in the valley. He walked to the door, and I, by instinct, retreated. I thought of running, but my legs, traitors, remembered what my body never forgot. The strength in his voice, the touch he didn't give, but which my skin still yearned for. The king entered without asking. Our eyes met, and in that instant, I ceased to be the fugitive. I saw the astonishment in him, not the rage of a hunter, but the painful recognition of someone rediscovering something thought long dead. I was the daughter of the woman he had secretly loved, the Omega who had been betrayed by her own blood. I was the mistake the kingdom had ordered erased. "Why did you flee?" he asked, his voice low. I smiled bitterly. "Because you taught me I was born wrong." He closed his eyes, and the weight of silence between us was heavier than the howls of the beasts. Outside, the wolves awaited the signal to attack, but the signal never came. Instead, he removed his gloves and let the cold burn him. He said the orders had not been his, that he had been betrayed within his own council, that someone wanted my death to erase a dangerous truth. I was the heir of a mixed lineage, daughter of an Omega and a king. My blood, half wolf, half human, was an affront to the laws of the pack. My existence could destroy the balance of the throne. That was the first night I realized the hunt had never been just about me. It was about an entire kingdom built on lies. 7 years earlier, I was merely a servant in the palace of Blackstone Keep. My mother, Lyra, had died in winter, leaving me alone in the servants' quarters, without a name, without a past, only with the birthmark I hid under long sleeves, a crescent moon on my left forearm. The other servants whispered it was a bad omen, that a woman marked by the moon brought misfortune. I learned to live in the shadows, to move unnoticed, to keep my gaze on the ground, until the night his eyes landed on mine. It was the harvest festival, one of the rare occasions when servants could circulate among the nobility, serving wine and delicacies at the long tables of the main hall. Music filled the air, along with the warmth of 1,000 lit candles. My fingers trembled as I balanced trays of fruit, trying not to look at the haughty faces of the lords of the northern lands. That's when I felt a shiver down my spine, that instinctive feeling of being watched. I looked up, unintentionally, and my gaze crossed with that of the Alpha King, Orion Ravenswood, the last of the Wolf dynasty. Stories circulated about him, how he had ascended to the throne at 20 after his father's mysterious death, how he commanded the pack with an iron fist, how he could smell a lie on a man and punish betrayals before they even occurred. The villagers feared him. The court revered him. No one truly knew him. In that moment, standing in the center of the hall in his black tunic with the silver wolf emblem embroidered, he looked at me as if he could see through me. It wasn't the look a king gives a servant. It was the gaze of one who recognizes something that should not exist. I averted my eyes, confused, and the tray slipped from my fingers. The clang of metal against the stone floor silenced the music. Fruits rolled, scattering like drops of blood. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," I stammered, kneeling hastily to gather the mess. A shadow covered me. I didn't need to look to know it was him. The air around me had grown, heavy, laden with a scent I couldn't name, something like wet earth and burnt wood. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice not a shout, but one that pierced the skin like one. I raised my face, feeling the weight of hundreds of gazes. The entire court watched us. "What is your name?" he asked. "Arya," I replied, surprised by my own voice. "Arya, without a surname. My king." He studied me for what felt like an eternity. His grey eyes held an unusual, almost animal glint. "No," he said finally, "that is not your name." My heart stopped. I felt the blood drain from my face. How could he know? "From now on, you will serve in the North Wing," he declared, his tone allowing no questions. "Present yourself to Lady Rowena tomorrow at sunrise." And he walked away, leaving me in the center of a sea of curious and hostile stares. Lady Marcella, the king's betrothed, stared at me from the main table with such evident hatred that my stomach turned. That night, while the other servants slept, I cried silently on my straw mattress. I didn't know what had happened, but an ancient instinct warned me. My life had just changed, and not for the better. The North Wing was the oldest part of the castle. It housed the royal family's chambers and those of the closest advisors. It also housed the ancestral relics, the sacred objects of the Ravenswood lineage. No common servant ever set foot in those corridors, except those who served the royal family directly. Lady Rowena, the king's aunt and keeper of traditions, received me with eyes cold as stone. "So you're the girl," she said, circling me like a predator. "I see nothing special. What did my nephew see in you?" I remained silent, head bowed. "Your tasks will be simple," she continued. "You will clean the royal chambers, change the linens, keep the fireplaces lit. You will not touch any object without permission. You will not speak to the king unless he addresses you. You will not listen to the councillors' conversations. If you break any of these rules, you will return to the stables, if you're lucky." I nodded, even though the idea of being in the king's chambers made my body turn to ice. "There's something else," she added, leaning her face close to mine. "If by chance the king shows special interest in you, remember, he is betrothed to Lady Marcella. The wedding will take place on the next full moon. Any interference in this arrangement would be considered treason. And you know what happens to traitors, don't you, girl?" I swallowed hard. Everyone knew. Traitors were taken to the Howling Woods and were never heard from again. Only the wolves returned. "Yes, my lady," I replied. Lady Rowena smiled, a smile as cold as winter. "Good. Then begin your work. The king's chambers need to be cleaned before he returns from the hunt." The royal chamber was vast, lit by high windows overlooking the mountains. An immense bed occupied the center, covered with dark furs and linen sheets. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting hunting and war scenes. There was something primal about the place despite its luxury, as if it were more a wolf's den than a man's bedroom. I began to clean, trying to ignore his scent that permeated everything, a scent that, strangely, seemed familiar, as if part of a lost memory. As I dusted a carved oak table, I saw a small silver casket with intricate wolf carvings. Something drew me to it. An impulse I couldn't control. My fingers touched the cold metal, and I felt an electric current surge through my arm. "What do you think you're doing?" I spun around with a start. The king stood at the door, still dressed for the hunt, with streaks of mud and what looked like blood on his clothes. His eyes glinted dangerously. "Forgive me, Your Majesty," I stammered, stepping away from the casket. "I was just dusting." He crossed the room in long strides, stopping inches from me. He was too tall, too strong, and his gaze was too intense. I felt small under his scrutiny. "Do you know what's in this casket?" he asked, his voice low and grave. "No, sir." "The truth," he replied enigmatically. "A truth many would kill to hide." We stood in silence, too close. I could feel the heat emanating from him, see the small scars on his face that courtiers would never notice from a distance. "Show me your arm," he ordered suddenly. I took a step back, instinctively protecting my left arm. "My arm, sir." "Don't make me repeat myself." With trembling fingers, I pulled up my sleeve, revealing the crescent moon birthmark. His face hardened, and, for an instant, I thought I saw pain in his eyes. "Do you know what it means?" he asked, softer now. "It's just a birthmark, Your Majesty." He touched the mark with the tip of his fingers, a touch so light I barely felt it, but my entire body reacted as if struck by lightning. "No," he said. "It is the symbol of the royal shadow line, the mark of Lyra's lost daughter." My heart stopped. "My mother? You knew my mother?" A sound at the door interrupted our conversation. Lady Marcella stood there, her red dress contrasting with the paleness of her face as she observed the proximity between us. "So the rumours are true," she said, her voice cutting. "The special servant, almost poetic, isn't it, my king? History repeats itself." The king stepped away from me, his face returning to the impassive mask he wore before the court. "Lady Marcella, this is not the time." "When will it be the time, my king? After our wedding? Or perhaps you intend to postpone it again, as you have for the past 2 moons. There was contained fury in her every word, and I wished I could disappear. This was not my place, among kings and ladies, among power disputes I barely understood. "Leave," the king ordered, without looking at me. I didn't need to be told twice. I hurried out, feeling Lady Marcella's venomous gaze follow me to the corridor. But, as the door closed behind me, I heard her words, clear as crystal. "She has the mark, doesn't she? Like her mother, the same mark that nearly destroyed your father." That night, I couldn't sleep. The words of the king and Lady Marcella echoed in my mind. My mother had never spoken of my father. I grew up, believing I was the child of some soldier or merchant who had passed through the village and never returned. But the king's reaction, his knowledge of the mark. 3 days passed, and I didn't see him again. I cleaned his chambers when he was absent, always feeling watched by the guards stationed in the corridor. On the 4th night, as I arranged the furs on the royal bed, the door opened silently. "I came to speak with you away from prying ears," the king said, locking the door behind him. I curtsied hastily, trying to control the tremor in my hands. "Your mother," he began, approaching slowly, "was the guardian of the forest's secrets. An Omega, born with the gift of sight. My father consulted her in secret, for she could see the future in the stars. My mother was just a servant, I protested, confused. He smiled, a sad smile. That is what they made you believe. In truth, Lyra was the last descendant of the Shadow Line, the ancient guardians of this land before my family assumed the throne. She and my father, they loved each other. The revelation struck like lightning. That's impossible. The old king was a tormented man, he finished. A king torn between love and duty. He was betrothed to my mother, an alliance that sealed peace between the northern clans. But his heart belonged to Lyra. I felt my legs weaken, and I leaned against the bedpost. What are you saying? I am saying that you are not the daughter of just any soldier. You are the daughter of Lyra, of the Shadow Line, and King Aldrich Ravenswood. The world seemed to spin around me. No, that would make me. My half-sister, he concluded, his eyes fixed on mine. Daughter of the same father, but of older and more powerful blood. That is why the mark appeared on you. That is why, when I saw you that night, I knew immediately who you were. Warm tears streamed down my face. Why are you telling me this now? Why, after all these years? He drew closer until I could see the subtle variations of grey in his eyes. Because you are in danger. There are rumours in court. Lady Rowena suspects who you are, and she will never allow the Shadow Line blood to mix with the Ravenswood. In her mind, that would be an abomination. What should I do? I asked, feeling fear spread through my veins. I need to hide you until I can guarantee your safety. The marriage to Lady Marcella will strengthen your position on the throne, I completed, understanding the politics behind his actions. He nodded. It is a necessary arrangement for the stability of the kingdom. But afterward I can protect you openly. Reveal who you truly are. There was a painful sincerity in his voice that made me believe him, despite the absurdity of the situation. Do you live in the servants' wing? He asked. Yes, in the last. Room down the east corridor. Tonight, lock your door. Open it for no one. Tomorrow, one of my trusted men will come for you. He will take you to a safe place. Before I could reply, we heard footsteps in the corridor. The king quickly stepped away, assuming a formal posture. Finish your work and withdraw, he said, loud enough for anyone outside to hear. I curtsied mechanically, my mind still processing everything that had happened. When I left the royal chambers, I saw Lady Rowena at the end of the corridor, watching me with her hawk-like eyes. That night, I did as the king ordered. I locked my door and waited, lying on the hard mattress, watching the shadows the moonlight cast on the wall. Around midnight, I heard a noise at the lock. Someone was trying to open my door. I froze, not knowing if it was the king's messenger or some threat. Open up, servant, a female voice whispered. Lady Marcella. I remained silent, my heart pounding in my chest. I know you're in there. Open, or I will break down this door. I stayed still. There was a moment of silence and then her voice again, lower and more dangerous. He told you, didn't he? About your mother and the old king, about who you really are. Do you think that gives you any rights? You're mistaken, bastard. Your blood is an abomination, a forbidden mixture that will never have a place in this kingdom. Her words were like sharp knives. You will leave, she continued. One way or another. Tonight by your own will or tomorrow dragged out by the guards. I heard her footsteps receding, and only then did I breathe again. I didn't sleep. At every sound, every movement of shadows, I started. When the first rays of sun touched the window, I heard soft knocks at the door. In the king's name, a male voice said. I opened a crack, cautiously. A tall, strong man with scars on his face and alert eyes stood there. I am Thorn, he introduced himself. The king's personal guard. Come with me and bring only what's essential. I didn't have much to take, just a small locket from my mother and a change of clothes. Thorn led me through secondary corridors, downstairs I hadn't even known existed, until we reached a discreet door that opened onto the gardens. A horse waited for us, hidden among tall bushes. "Where are we going?" I asked as he helped me mount. "To the gamekeeper's cabin, on the edge of the howling woods. You will stay there until the king sends further orders." We galloped across the fields, keeping away from the main road. The cold wind whipped my face and I couldn't stop looking back, expecting to see soldiers pursuing us at any moment. The cabin was at the edge of the kingdom's territory, almost hidden among ancient trees. It was a simple place, with a stone, fireplace and few furnishings. Thorn lit the fire and checked the provisions. "There's enough food for a week," he said. "Fresh water can be had from the creek behind the house. Don't light lamps at night, don't make too much smoke, and most importantly, do not enter the woods, under any circumstances." "Why?" I asked, looking out the window at the dense mass of trees that began a few feet away. "The howling woods belong to the wolves. Not even the king enters there without a sacred purpose." He mounted again, preparing to leave. "When will you return?" I asked, feeling the panic of solitude. "In 3 days. If anything happens before then, there's a bone horn above the fireplace. A long blast will draw the attention of the forest guards." And then he left, leaving me alone with the silence and the secrets that had turned my life upside down. The first 2 days passed slowly. I occupied my time reorganizing the cabin, gathering nearby herbs and trying to process everything I had discovered. At night, I sat by the window watching the moon grow in the sky and thinking of my mother, not as the silent servant I had known, but as the powerful Omega of legends, a king's lover. On the 3rd night, when darkness had fully fallen, I heard a noise outside the cabin. It wasn't human footsteps, but a soft rustle, like paws on dry leaves. My blood ran cold. I extinguished the candle and approached the window, trying to see in the gloom. A huge white wolf stood in the clearing in front of the cabin. Its eyes gleamed in the darkness like 2 moons fixed in my direction. It didn't move. It didn't howl. It just watched. I remained motionless, barely daring to breathe. It was larger than any wolf I had ever seen, with a bearing that seemed almost regal. As if it felt my gaze, the animal tilted its head slightly in an almost human gesture. Suddenly, other wolves emerged from the shadows, smaller but equally majestic. They surrounded the white wolf like subjects encircling a monarch. One of the smaller wolves growled, looking directly at me through the window. The white wolf emitted a low sound, almost a bark, and the other retreated. It was as if it was protecting me. For a long moment we stayed like this. I inside, the cabin, the wolves outside, in a strange standoff. Then, as silently as they had arrived, they withdrew, one by one, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. The white wolf was the last to go, its eyes never leaving mine until darkness swallowed it. Thorn did not return on the 3rd day nor the 4th. On the 5th day, food began to run scarce. On the 6th, snow began to fall, thin at first, then in heavy flakes that covered everything in white. My only hope was the horn, but something told me that using it would be a mistake, that it would attract enemies before allies. On the 7th night, the wolves returned. This time, they stayed closer to the cabin. The white wolf approached the door and scratched the wood with its paws, as if asking to enter. There was an intelligence in those yellow eyes that transcended the animal. An irrational impulse made me open the door. The wolf recoiled a few steps, but did not flee. We stood staring at each other under the starry sky and the softly falling snow. "What do you want from me?" I asked, feeling foolish for speaking to an animal. The wolf looked at the forest and then back at me, as if inviting me to follow it. "I can't go into the forest," I said, remembering Thorn's warning. The animal growled softly, impatiently. It took a few steps towards the trees, then stopped and looked back. I was cold, hungry, and almost out of firewood. The cabin no longer offered safety. And there was something about that wolf that seemed strangely familiar. I grabbed my cloak, my mother's locket, and followed the white wolf into the howling woods. The forest at night was a completely different world. Under the silver moonlight, the trees seemed like ancient sentinels, observing my passage with invisible eyes. The white wolf moved with grace, always a few steps ahead of me, pausing occasionally to ensure I was following. The other wolves flanked us, keeping their distance but clearly escorting us. I should have been terrified, but strangely, I felt safer there than in the cabin. We walked for hours, venturing deeper and deeper into the heart of the forest. When my feet could no longer bear it, when the cold began to numb my fingers, we reached a clearing. In the center there was a circle of ancient stones covered with moss and carved symbols. The stones emanated a soft warmth, melting the snow around them. And in the middle of the circle, there was a human figure. The king. Dressed as I had never seen him before, without his crown, without formal robes, just simple hunting clothes and a wolfskin cloak over his shoulders. His eyes, however, were the same, piercing and ancient. The white wolf advanced and sat beside him, like a faithful guardian. "You came," the king said, his voice mingling with the whisper of the wind through the trees. "I didn't have much choice," I replied, still trying to understand what was happening. "Your guard never returned." "Thorn is dead," he said bluntly. "They found his body on the road to the castle, his throat torn open as if by wolves. But it wasn't my wolves who killed him." I felt the world sway. "What's happening?" "War," he replied simply. "Lady Rowena found out about you, about who you are. She and Lady Marcella convinced half the court that I intend to place you on the throne, disrespecting ancient alliances. They call you the Abomination, half human, half wolf." "I didn't ask for any of this," I whispered, feeling hot tears contrast with the cold on my face. "No, you didn't," he agreed, taking a step towards me. "Just as I didn't ask to be born into the Ravenswood lineage, nor to carry the burden of the crown." He extended his hand, gently touching my face. His touch was warm, almost feverish. "But we are who we are, Arya of the Shadow Line. And tonight, you need to make a choice." "What choice?" "The sacred circle where we stand," he explained, indicating the stones around us, "is where ancient magic still lives. Where the first Ravenswoods made their pact with the wolves, becoming both man and beast. Where your mother, as the last of the Shadow Line, served as priestess." I looked around, noticing for the first time familiar symbols on the stones. Symbols my mother used to draw secretly, thinking I didn't see. "This is the place where you can claim your true power," he continued. "The power of dual blood, wolf and human, Ravenswood and Shadowline. It is your birthright. What if I don't want this power?" A sad smile curved his lips. "Then you will die. Lady Rowena has already sent hunters after you. Even if I order them to stop, there are many who believe your existence is a threat." "And you?" I asked, holding his gaze. "What do you believe?" He moved closer until I could feel his warm breath on my face. "I believe you are the union that was always meant to be. The balance the kingdom lost when your father chose duty over love." There was an intensity in his gaze that frightened and attracted me at the same time. It was not the gaze of a brother for a sister. It was something more primal, more profound. "You are not just my half-sister," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "The Shadowline blood that runs in you is a different strength, a deeper current than the faint echo in my own Ravenswood lineage. Our connection is through our father, but our destinies are distinct." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, confused. "Because when you claim your power here tonight, our destinies will be sealed in ways you do not yet comprehend." A distant howl cut through the night. The wolves around us became alert, ears perked. "They are coming," the king said, his expression hardening. "Rowena's hunters. You must decide now, Arya. What should I do?" He took a small silver dagger from his belt. Your blood on the stones, the ancestral offering, the rest, the circle will do. I took the dagger, its weight strange in my hand. I looked at the ancient stones, at the expectant wolves, at the king with his eyes that seemed to hold the secret of 1,000 lives. I remembered my mother, how she sang to me on stormy nights, how she taught me to see patterns in the stars, how on her deathbed she whispered, "Remember who you are, not what they told you you are." I pressed the blade against my palm and made a swift cut. The pain was sharp, followed by the warm flow of blood. I knelt and pressed my hand against the central stone, feeling the rough texture of the ancient symbols. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stone began to glow, a soft, bluish light that spread to the other stones in the circle. The air grew denser, charged with electricity. My vision blurred, and I felt my entire body tingling, as if something within me was awakening after a long sleep. The wolves began to howl, a ghostly chorus that echoed through the forest. The white wolf approached, its yellow eyes fixed on mine. I could see my own reflection in them, and for a moment I saw my eyes changing, pupils dilating, becoming more wild. A sharp pain shot through my body, as if my bones were breaking and reconfiguring. I fell to my knees, gasping. My skin felt like it was on fire, and I could swear I saw white fur emerging on my arms. "What is happening?" I gasped, looking at the king. He knelt beside me, gripping my shoulders tightly. "The transformation. The first is always the most painful." "Transformation? You are becoming what you were always destined to be, neither human nor wolf, both. The last heir of the 2 oldest lineages of these lands." The pain was unbearable now. I wanted to scream, but my voice was lost. However, at the same time, there was a strange exhilaration growing within me, a sense of power I had never experienced before. My senses sharpened suddenly. I could hear the smallest movement in the trees hundreds of yards away. I could smell every animal hidden in the forest. I could see every detail in the shadows as if it were broad daylight, and I could hear the hunters approaching, the sound of their boots on the snow, the smell of steel and sweat. The king must have perceived the change in me, for he nodded with a fierce smile. "You feel them now, don't you? Your first hunt." I wanted to say I wasn't a hunter, that I was just a frightened servant, but the truth was, I wasn't anymore. Something had changed irrevocably within me. "Are they coming to kill us?" I asked, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "They're coming to try," he replied, with absolute confidence. The first hunters emerged from the edge of the clearing, men dressed in black with bows and silver swords. Seeing them, the wolves formed a defensive semicircle before us. "See who leads," the king murmured, his body tense beside me. I narrowed my eyes, and the distance seemed to shrink. Lady Marcella, dressed in light armor, wielded an ornate crossbow. Beside her, Lady Rowena held a silver scepter with symbols that seemed to distort the light around it. "King Orion," Rowena's voice cut through the night, "step away from the abomination, and we will spare your life. The council has decided. The hybrid must die so the kingdom may live." The king rose, imposing. "What council, Aunt? One you convened in secret while I was hunting. The same council that tried to kill my father when he dared to love beyond the laws of the court." "Your father was weak," she replied with contempt. "He allowed himself to be seduced by the Shadowline blood, as you are now. This must end, Orion. The lineage must remain pure." "And after you kill the last of the Shadowline," he continued, his voice dangerously calm, "what will you do with me? Proceed with the arranged marriage, control me through Lady Marcella, or perhaps a tragic accident during a hunt?" Lady Marcella stepped forward, her beauty cold as ice under the moonlight. "You rejected me for her," she said, pointing the crossbow in my direction. "Your own bastard sister." "She is not my sister," the king replied. Not in the way you imply. She is my complement, my balance, the moon to my sun, the shadow to my light. Something warmed within my chest upon hearing those words. It wasn't just protection he offered. It was something deeper, more ancient, something that transcended blood ties or court conventions. Enough, Lady Rowena decreed, raising her scepter. Kill the hybrid. Arrest the king. The hunters advanced, the wolves roared, and then chaos. It all happened very fast. I saw Rowena's men firing arrows that whizzed through the air. I saw the white wolf leap onto the first hunter, tearing his throat with deadly precision. I saw the king draw a sword that gleamed as if made of moonlight, facing 3 men at once. And then I felt something tear within me, not from pain but from liberation, as if a door that had always been locked finally opened. My vision blurred, my body trembled, and when I came to, I was lower, closer to the ground. I looked down and saw white paws where my hands should have been. I had transformed into a wolf. The world exploded with sensations. Every scent was a story, every sound a warning or an invitation. My muscles responded with a strength and agility I had never known as a human. Without thinking, I launched myself into the battle. I leapt onto one of the hunters, aiming his crossbow at the king. My teeth found flesh and bone, and the metallic taste of blood flooded my mouth. A distant part of my mind was horrified by what I was doing, but the wolf's instinct was stronger. The king saw my transformation and smiled, a wild smile that mirrored my own feeling. Together, side by side, man and wolf, we faced the invaders. Lady Marcella shouted orders, trying to regroup her men, but panic was already spreading. Many had never faced a real wolf, much less an entire pack led by 2 alphas. When half the hunters were dead or wounded, Lady Rowena raised her scepter. A flash of silver light exploded, blinding me momentarily. When I regained my sight, I saw that she had created a luminous barrier between us. "This does not end here, nephew," she said, as she retreated with Lady Marcella and the remaining men. "The court will know what you have become, a traitor to your own lineage, a king who chose beasts instead of his own people." "The people will follow me when they know the truth," the king replied, his voice resounding in the clearing, "that you and your conspirators plotted against the crown, trying to kill the last heir of ancient blood out of fear and greed." "We shall see," was Rowena's final reply, before she and her group disappeared into the shadows of the forest. When the last echo of the invaders dissipated, I felt my body begin to change again. The reverse transformation was as painful as the first, bones cracking, muscles reorganizing, fur replacing skin. I fell to the forest floor, gasping and naked, my humanity slowly returning. The king took off his cloak and covered me gently. His eyes, when they met mine, held a mixture of admiration, respect, and something more, something that made my heart race for reasons that had nothing to do with the battle. "You fought well," he said, helping me up. "Like a true alpha." "I killed men," I whispered, the reality of what had happened finally hitting me. "Men who came to kill us," he reminded me. "This is the oldest law of the forest, to survive." The wolves approached, including the white wolf, who now looked at me not as a guide but as an equal. "What happens now?" I asked, holding the cloak tightly around my body. The king looked at the stars for a moment, as if seeking answers in the night sky. Then he turned his eyes to me with steely determination. "Now, we reclaim what is ours by right. The throne, the kingdom, the future." "They won't accept it easily," I warned. "Not after what happened here." A slow smile spread across his face, not the polite smile of a monarch, but the predatory smile of a wolf. "We don't need them to accept it easily, just to accept it, eventually. And for those who resist," he looked at the pack around us, "well, the Howling Woods hold many secrets that have never been revealed." That night, under the starry sky, With the taste of battle still on my tongue and the warmth of the sacred circle enveloping us, we sealed a silent pact. Not with words or oaths, but with glances and subtle touches that spoke of an intertwined future. Not as king and subject, not as diluted blood siblings, but as two beings who had found in each other the perfect balance between humanity and beast, between duty and desire, between past and future. 3 days later, King Orion Ravenswood returned to Blackstone Keep. Not alone, but accompanied by me, no longer a servant, but as an official advisor, openly wearing the crescent moon symbol on my arm. The court buzzed with rumours. Lady Rowena and Lady Marcella had spread stories of dark magic and conspiracies, but the imposing presence of the king and the unwavering loyalty of his personal guards maintained order. In the great hall before all the nobility, the king made an announcement that shocked everyone. "The marriage to Lady Marcella is cancelled," he declared, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "And Lady Rowena is stripped of her duties as advisor for treason against the crown." Cries of outrage filled the hall. Lady Marcella advanced, her face contorted with fury. "You cannot do this!" she screamed. "The agreement with my family has sustained your throne for generations." "The agreement," the king replied calmly, "was based on lies. Your father and Lady Rowena conspired to kill my father when they discovered his love for Lyra of the Shadowline. It was not illness that took him, but poison slowly administered." A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Lady Rowena paled. "This is madness," she said, but her voice trembled. "I have the confession of the royal apothecary," the king continued. "Obtained this morning, when he realized the wind is blowing in a different direction now." Turning to me, the king took my hand and led me to the center of the hall. "This is Arya of the Shadowline, daughter of Lyra, the last guardian of the ancient traditions and of King Aldrich Ravenswood. She is the union of the two great lineages that built this kingdom, and from today forward, she will be recognized as a princess of royal blood and my advisor in all matters." The silence that followed was absolute. I could feel the weight of hundreds of gazes, some curious, many hostile, some calculating. I held my head high, letting them see the birthmark on my arm, the symbol I now knew represented my true heritage. Lady Marcella laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "So it's true. You intend to place your bastard half-sister on the throne, or perhaps in your bed?" The king was unperturbed. "The blood ties between us are as distant as the stars, Lady Marcella. And as for the throne, it belongs to whoever the people choose when my time ends." With a gesture, guards appeared, surrounding Lady Rowena and Lady Marcella. "You will be escorted to your lands in the north," the king declared. "Do not return without express permission from the crown, under penalty of death." As the two were led away, I could see the hatred in their eyes, a hatred that promised this was not over. The king turned to the tense court. "Who else questions my decision?" Silence. Even the most discontent knew that challenging the king openly now would be political suicide, if not literal. "Good," he concluded. "From this night forward, a new era begins for our kingdom, an era of balance between the old and the new, between tradition and change." His eyes met mine, and for a brief moment I saw in them a promise, the promise of a future neither of us had dared to imagine before, but which was now within our grasp. That night, as the full moon illuminated the palace gardens, I found the king, Orion, walking alone among the white roses. Dressed without his royal insignia, he seemed younger, lighter. "The court is buzzing," I commented, joining him. "Let it buzz," he replied with a smile. "Eventually they will realize that change is inevitable." "And what about the north? Lady Rowena will not give up easily." He gently touched my face, a gesture that had now become familiar between us. "Neither will we," he said simply. We stood in silence for a moment, contemplating the stars. There was so much to do, so many challenges ahead. The rebuilding of the kingdom, the acceptance of the people, the constant danger of conspiracies. But that night, under the starry sky, we allowed ourselves a moment of peace. "You know," he said finally, "there's an ancient legend among the Ravenswoods. It says that when a king finds his true complement, the one who balances his nature, the kingdom prospers for 1,000 years. And you believe that?" I asked, feeling my heart quicken under his gaze. "I believe I have found my balance," he replied, moving closer. The rest we will build together, day by day." When his lips touched mine, it was as if the sacred circle of the forest had closed around us again. We were no longer just two individuals. We were the union of two lineages, of two natures, of two destinies that finally intertwined as they always should have. And under the moonlight, as we transformed together, running like wolves through the palace's secret gardens, I knew that no army, no conspiracy, no force in this world could separate what the forest, blood, and destiny had united. Today, years later, I still feel the duality within me, the servant and the princess, the human and the wolf. And when the full moon rises over the pacified kingdom, when the white wolves run freely through the fields they once feared, when the king and I govern side by side, neither as siblings nor as conventional lovers, but as something more ancient and sacred, I finally understand what my mother meant on her deathbed. Remember who you are, not what they told you you are. I am Arya of the Shadow Line, last of a lineage, first of a new era. Half human, half wolf. Neither servant nor queen. Something between worlds, a bridge between realities. And beside the Alpha King, my perfect complement, I rewrite the history they tried to erase with blood and lies.